The Industrial Revolution resulted in one of the most profound and far-reaching changes in the history of humanity. It continues to influence our society today. Urbanization and the domestication of animals and plants compete for importance. However, the past 250 years of industrialization since 1760 is one of the most influential developments of the past 13,000 years. It has massively altered our lives and has changed where we live, how we work and are educated, what we wear and eat and do for fun. It has an enormous influence on how long we live and how many children we have. The Industrial Revolution politically enabled the countries that cradled it. Technological and economic advantages led to colonization and control. It allowed Northern Europe to rule most of the modern world. In short, the Industrial Revolution was the game changer of modern history. More than anything else, it is what makes the modern world modern. The Industrial Revolution was a time of great change. Change in technology can be seen as an advance. Some social changes, such as the emancipation of slaves, are universally seen as being good. Other changes led to great suffering, a loss of freedom and what is now viewed as violations of human rights. The mechanization of production and its organization created a labor shortage. Children were increasingly used as cheap source of labor by both the state and developing companies. This presentation will investigate the nature of child labor during the Industrial Revolution and how it was abolished. Its examples show the difficulty of creating change in a complex environment. Social, economic, ethical, religious, and political issues interact and still do today. This example may help us understand problems with child labor into the future. The Industrial Revolution began in the United Kingdom, late in the 18th century. Before this, most people resided in small, rural communities where their daily existences revolved around farming. Life for the average person was difficult, as incomes were meagre. Malnourishment and disease were common. People produced the bulk of their own food, clothing, furniture, and tools. Most manufacturing was done in homes or small rural shops, using hand tools or simple machines. As the Industrial Revolution progressed, people migrated from the rural countryside to the growing cities. Rural poverty was increasing. It was made worse by the enclosure of land by dominant landowners. The availability of work in the cities were growing, and there were few other options. The cities expanded to provide housing for the factory workers. The Industrial Revolution began in Northern Europe and spread to America and the rest of the world. I will be focusing predominantly on the United Kingdom. Although many industries use child labour, the cotton industry was very large and can be used as a useful example of industry in general. As can be seen, there are certain hotspots where once rural settlers started to congregate. This often happened in confined areas that later become large cities like Manchester. In Australia, Manchester is used as a general term for cloth. There are also collections of urban areas made up of multiple cities and counties like Yorkshire and Lancashire. London in the south grew also, but for other complex reasons. Child labour was common before the Industrial Revolution. Poverty forced parents to find work for them as soon as possible, but before the coming out of the machines there was not much work to be found. The factories changed all that. In 1821, around 50% of the workforce was under 20 years old, and the average age of starting work was 8.5. Many of the typical jobs of the children were very dangerous. In the cotton industry, they attended the spinning machines and mending breaks in the thread as piecers, or worked under them as scavengers. In the mines, they were trapdoor minders, pick holders, and coal scavengers. They were chimney sweeps and even prostitutes. During the Industrial Revolution, children worked long, hard hours, often from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m., 6 days a week. This affected them not only mentally and emotionally, but physically. The medical men were divided. Dr. William Wotton told the British Parliament that labour is so moderate it can scarcely be called labour at all. I should not think there would be any injury from it. Dr. Samuel Smith did not agree. Up to 12 or 13 years of age, the bones are so soft they will bend in any direction. By long continued standing the knees turn inwards, producing knock knees, sometimes seen it so striking that the individual will lose 12 inches of his height. Earning a crust was seen by parents as far more important than education. Most education occurred on Sundays, and was religious in nature. Change was slow for many reasons. It was not in the interest of capital to lose their cheap source of labour. In addition, poverty was often seen by the great and good as being the reflection of the moral state of the poor. In the 19th century, authors such as Charles Dickens and Elizabeth Barrett Browning wrote novels and poems highlighting the horrors of child labour. However, Religion played a large part in inspiring the 19th century Protestant figures of power to create change. The towering figure was the 7th Earl of Shaftesbury, or known as Lord Ashley. Although there had been an Act of Parliament in 1788 regulating the use of children as chimney sweeps, and the Factory Act 1802, where children were limited to working 12-hour days, it was not until Lord Ashley's introduction of another Factory Act 1833, 10-Hour Act, that children under 9 were prohibited from paid work and the hours of those under 13 were limited. 2 hours of education was compulsory, and 4 inspectors were appointed to cover the whole country. The act proved difficult to enforce. The legislation had focused only on the working hours of children, not the circumstances or industries in which those children worked. This issue was addressed by the Mines Act 1842, which made it illegal for women or children under the age of 13 to work underground. This was followed up by his efforts to pass another 10-Hour Act, 1847. This limited women and children working in factories and textile mills to only 10 hours a day. Since that time, there has been a slow drip of legislation which created the opportunity for child labour to be phased out. As working conditions generally improved and compulsory education was implemented, social norms and expectations changed and child labour decreased in Britain. The non-government organisation, NGO, the National Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Children, NSPCC, was founded in 1889. This was 60 years after the foundation of the National Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, NSPCA. A combination of changing economic circumstances, social norms, engagement by notable people, and legislation chipped away at the evil of child labour in Britain, and has come near to abolishing it. However, there are still dangerous occupations that 16-year-old children are completely legal in pursuing, as a soldier, for instance. Economic circumstances are major drivers of change in social expectations and also of legislation. How wrong something is may become relative when there is a financial need. Poor families in less advantaged places in the world may have no way to feed children and may need their income to survive. This enables child trafficking and slavery. A society that is ripped apart by war or natural disasters is a fertile ground for such practices. Large movements of refugees also create instability and child endangerment. Western companies may also be supporting child labour and other exploiting work practices by outsourcing manufacturing to cheaper and less developed parts of the world where sweated labour is common. World Vision states, 73 million child labourers are between the ages of 5 and 11. Despite common belief, 58% of child labour is in agriculture, and child labour has decreased by a third since 2000. Most countries around the world have legislation in place to regulate child labour in some fashion. That legislation varies enormously between nations based on cultural, economic, and sometimes religious factors. These laws are variably effective and often unevenly enforced. Most countries also have national-based advocacy groups. Many of these have an international perspective. At the international level, there are charities acting as advocates such as Save the Children. This was originally a UK organisation but now has 30 national organisations. Médecins Sans Frontières, the MSF, the International Committee of the Red Cross, World Vision, and many others have a supranational role. After the end of the First World War, one of the founders of the Save the Children, Eglantine Jebb, drafted a document that became the Declaration of Geneva, and was accepted by the UN precursor, the League of Nations in 1924. It was the first ever human rights document endorsed by a multinational organisation. After the Second World War in 1946, the newly formed United Nations, UN, adopted this document. It was expanded in 1948 and further expanded in 1959 as the Declaration of the Human Rights of a Child. In 1989, the UN adopted the Convention on the Rights of the Child, CRC. This has been ratified by every member of the UN except the USA, who have issues with passing control of domestic issues to international bodies. For all the other nations, it is the force of international law. Article number 32 is the relevant set of laws that deals with the child labour today. This deals with the worst forms of child labour, and defines them as all types of slavery, including the sale and trafficking of children, forced labour to pay off debt, any other type of forced labour, including using children in war and armed conflict, all activities which sexually exploit children, such as prostitution, pornography, or pornographic performances, Any involvement in illegal activities, especially the production or trafficking of drugs. Any work with which could damage the health, safety, or well-being of the child, so-called hazardous work. The example of Britain during the Industrial Revolution illustrates the complex interactions between economics, ethics, advocacy, law, and society. It illustrates the children's pain and the long road to change. Of course, the existence of the UN and such documents as the CRC is a great step in the right direction. Although it has the force of law, it is not easy to enforce. This, in itself, does not eradicate the evil of child labour, child soldiers, and slavery. Changing economic circumstances, freedom from want, freedom from any form of discrimination, human rights, etc., is a long journey with many participants and many hurdles. These changes do not all happen in the same place or at the same time.